never imagined that the man I once called my hero, the one who carried me on his shoulders through the park on sunny afternoons, would one day stand in a cold courtroom and laugh at my deepest pain. My name is Emily Thompson, and this is the story of how my family, the people I loved most in this world, betrayed me in ways I could never have prepared for. It's also the story of how I found my strength and fought back. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the years when everything felt safe and warm. I was only 12 when my mother passed away from cancer. Those were the darkest days of my young life. The house felt empty, and Dad became both my father and mother. He worked long hours at his construction company, but he always made time for me. He would come home tired, yet he'd sit on the edge of my bed and tell me stories about my mother until I fell asleep. "You're my little fighter, Emily," he would say, kissing my forehead. "We're going to be okay, just you and me." I took those words to heart. I studied hard, worked part-time jobs through high school, and pushed myself through college while earning an accounting degree. By 24, I had landed a solid position as a financial analyst at a respected firm. I was proud of the life I was building. I bought my first car with my own savings, rented a small apartment, and started dreaming about the future. Then, Dad met Linda. She was in her early 50s, polished, with a warm smile, and a way of making everyone around her feel special. They met at a charity event, and within months, they were inseparable. I was cautious at first after losing Mom. I wanted to protect Dad's heart. But Linda seemed genuine. She listened to stories about Mom without jealousy. She helped organize my college graduation party, bought me beautiful earrings for my birthday, and even helped me pick out my wedding dress later on. When I met Michael at work, everything felt complete. He was steady, kind, and ambitious, an engineer with a gentle soul. We dated for 4 years before getting married in a beautiful backyard ceremony at Dad and Linda's house. Dad walked me down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. "Your mother would be so proud," he whispered. Linda hugged me tightly afterward and said, "Welcome to our family forever, sweetheart. We're so happy for you." Life after marriage was peaceful. Michael and I bought a cozy 3-bedroom house 2 towns away. We spent weekends visiting Dad and Linda, enjoying Sunday barbecues, holiday traditions, and family vacations. I even started helping Dad with the bookkeeping at his construction company when he complained about the complicated tax laws. Linda would sit beside me at the dining table, asking questions, saying she wanted to learn so she could support Dad better in his later years. I transferred money to them multiple times, first small amounts, then larger ones when the company faced delays. "Just temporary," Dad would say gratefully. "You're the best daughter anyone could ask for." Linda would cook my favorite meals and tell me how lucky Dad was to have me. I felt needed. I felt loved. I believed we were the kind of family that would always have each other's backs. But looking back with clearer eyes now, the subtle cracks were already forming. Linda's compliments sometimes carried a slight edge. Dad started consulting her before making any decision, even small ones about the company. They began talking more about their dreams of retirement luxury cruises, a vacation home by the lake, new cars. I ignored the unease in my stomach. After all, they had raised me. They deserved happiness. I had no idea that my love and loyalty were being carefully calculated and exploited. The first significant warning sign appeared about 2 years into my marriage. Dad's company hit a rough patch after losing a major government contract. One evening, he called me sounding worried and tired. "Emily, I need your help, sweetheart. Just $45,000 to cover payroll this month. I'll pay you back as soon as the next project clears, I promise. Linda was on the line too, her voice soft and emotional. We hate asking you this, Emily, but we're family. We've always been there for you. I wired the money the next morning without any hesitation. Michael raised his eyebrows when I told him later that night. Are you sure, Em? That's a lot of money for us right now. I reassured him it was temporary and that Dad had always been good about repaying. Over the next year, they did repay me in small installments, but the company seemed to bounce back suspiciously fast with new projects. Then the requests kept coming, one after another. A new kitchen renovation because Linda deserves to enjoy the house after all these years. Medical bills for Linda's mysterious treatments that never had clear paperwork or explanations. Dad's brand new truck because the old one was unsafe. Each time I helped. Each time I told myself this was what family does. But the doubts were slowly growing inside me. Why didn't they ever seem to save any money despite the successful business? Why did Linda always steer conversations away when I asked about their long-term financial plans? One night while visiting for dinner, I overheard Linda on the phone in the kitchen when she thought I was in the bathroom. Don't worry, Richard will sign whatever I put in front of him. The girl is too busy with her own life, and that husband of hers to notice anything. I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding. When I casually asked her about it later, she laughed it off smoothly. Oh, I was just talking to my sister about some insurance papers. Honey, you're overthinking things again. I convinced myself I had misheard. I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. I loved them too much to let doubt ruin our relationship. The biggest red flag came when Dad asked me to review his updated will as a favor between family. On the surface, it looked fair, but some clauses about a separate property trust and asset distribution seemed odd and one-sided. When I pointed them out gently, Linda quickly intervened with tears in her eyes. Why are you questioning your father's wishes, Emily? Don't you trust us after everything we've done for you since your mother passed? Dad looked disappointed and hurt. I thought you were different from others who only care about money. I backed off immediately, feeling guilty for even asking. That night, I cried in Michael's arms at home. Am I becoming paranoid and greedy? He held me close and said gently, You're just noticing things that have always been there, Em. Maybe it's time to set some boundaries. The seeds of doubt had been planted deep. I started checking old bank statements more carefully in my spare time. I noticed patterns, large withdrawals that didn't quite match the business expenses. But every time I tried to bring it up during visits, Linda would turn on the tears, or Dad would guilt-trip me about being ungrateful after everything they sacrificed when Mom died. I pushed the concerns down deep. I wanted so badly to believe in our perfect family life. It all started escalating when Dad announced he was retiring early and selling the construction company. He and Linda were excited about moving to a luxury retirement community. I was happy for them until I learned the sale price, nearly $2 million. That's when I asked about the loans I had given over the years and my share as discussed in the earlier will. The tone changed instantly. Linda smiled sweetly and said, Oh, honey, those were gifts from the heart. Family doesn't keep score. Dad avoided eye contact and changed the subject. A few weeks later, I received a letter from a lawyer I didn't know. Dad and Linda were transferring major assets into a trust that named only Linda as beneficiary. My name had been quietly removed from almost everything. When I confronted them at their house, Dad got angry for the first time in years. You're being paranoid, Emily. Linda has been more of a daughter to me lately than you have with your busy life. Those words broke something deep inside me. I tried to reason with them for weeks. I showed them printed bank records of all the money I had given, nearly $180,000 over the years. Linda cried and called me ungrateful and selfish. Dad told me to stop causing unnecessary drama in the family. Michael urged me strongly to get legal advice. I hesitated for a long time. Getting a lawyer felt like declaring war on my own father. I tried one last peaceful meeting. It ended with Dad yelling that I was entitled and that Mom would be ashamed of me. That was the moment I decided I had no choice but to fight. Money was tight after years of helping them. I couldn't afford a high-powered, expensive lawyer. I chose to represent myself with help from legal aid services and spent hundreds of hours researching late into the night. The court date was set. I walked into that courtroom nervous, scared, but determined to stand up for myself. The hearing started poorly. Dad's lawyer painted me as a greedy, ungrateful daughter trying to steal from her aging father. Dad sat there looking frail and betrayed. When it was my turn, I presented my evidence as calmly as I could. Then Dad leaned forward and laughed out loud in open court. Couldn't even afford a real lawyer, Emily? This is embarrassing for all of us. The judge looked displeased, but the humiliation burned deep. I was in the middle of explaining the long financial trail when the judge suddenly asked for a specific property transfer document. Dad's lawyer handed it over. The judge studied it carefully for a long moment, then looked up with a serious expression. Mrs. Linda Harper's signature appears on this transfer document, dated 3 weeks ago. This appears to be a forgery of Emily's signature on the original trust amendment. The courtroom went completely silent. Linda's face turned pale white. That single moment in the courtroom, the judge's calm but serious voice pointing out Linda's forged signature should have felt like the beginning of justice. Instead, it triggered the darkest, most painful chapter of my entire life. The hearing was immediately adjourned for further investigation, but the emotional wreckage had already begun. I barely remember driving home that day. My hands were shaking so badly on the steering wheel that Michael had to take over. I kept replaying Dad's laugh in my head, that cold, mocking sound that echoed through the courtroom. The man who once told me I was his little fighter had laughed at my pain in public. It cut deeper than any knife could. The first few nights were pure numbness. I would sit on the couch in our living room, staring at the wall for hours. Michael tried everything. He made my favorite tea, rubbed my back, and whispered that we would get through this together. But I couldn't feel anything. Food tasted like ash. Sleep became impossible. I would lie awake until 4 a.m., replaying every single memory with Dad and Linda, wondering how I had been so blind for so many years. By the end of the first week, the isolation hit me like a wave. Some relatives who had heard Dad's version of events started taking his side. My aunt called me one evening and said, "Emily, you're destroying your father in his old age. How can you be so cruel?" I tried to explain the forgery, the stolen money, the lies, but she hung up on me. Messages from cousins I had grown up with stopped coming. It felt like the entire family was slowly erasing me. Work became unbearable. I had always been the reliable one at the office, the person everyone counted on for accurate reports and calm solutions. Now I was making mistakes. I stared at spreadsheets for hours without processing anything. My boss pulled me aside gently after 2 weeks and suggested I take some personal time. "You don't look well, Emily. Take care of yourself." I nodded, went home and cried in the shower until the water ran cold. The self-doubt was the worst part. It consumed me. I would sit on the bedroom floor at 2 a.m., surrounded by old photo albums, questioning everything. Was I really the ungrateful daughter Dad said I was? Had I been too focused on my own life and neglected them? Was Linda right when she called me selfish? The little girl inside me who had lost her mother at 12 desperately wanted her father's approval again. That version of me whispered that maybe I should just drop everything, apologize, and go back to being their safety net. Michael and I started arguing not loudly, but painfully. One night he found me crying over bank statements again and gently closed the laptop. This is destroying you. We need to focus on our future. I snapped at him. You don't understand. He's my father. The only parent I have left. The hurt in Michael's eyes made me feel even worse. I apologized immediately, but the damage was done. Our once peaceful home now carried a heavy silence. I lost weight rapidly. My clothes hung loose on my body. Friends I had known for years stopped reaching out because I kept canceling plans. I felt completely alone, even when Michael was right beside me. Some nights I would drive to the park where Dad used to take me as a child. I'd sit on the same swing and cry quietly, remembering his strong hands pushing me higher, his laughter mixing with mine. How did we end up here? The financial pressure made everything darker. Legal aid was helpful, but slow. We were spending money on document requests, forensic accountant consultations, and time off work. Our savings, already strained from years of helping Dad and Linda, were disappearing fast. One evening, the bank called about a late mortgage payment. I broke down in the kitchen, telling Michael I felt like a complete failure. The lowest point came on a rainy Thursday night, about 5 weeks after that first court hearing. I had barely eaten for days. I locked myself in the bathroom, sat on the cold floor, and whispered to myself, maybe they're right. Maybe I am the problem. For one terrifying moment, I felt like I didn't want to keep fighting anymore. Michael must have sensed something was wrong. He knocked softly, then came in and held me as I sobbed uncontrollably. You are not alone, he kept repeating. I'm here. We're going to get through this. That night was a turning point, even if I didn't realize it yet. Something inside me cracked open. The pain was still there, raw, suffocating, overwhelming, but a tiny spark of anger began to grow alongside the sadness. Anger at Linda for her calculated manipulation. Anger at Dad for choosing her over me. And most importantly, a quiet anger at myself for allowing it to go on for so long. I started journaling late at night when sleep wouldn't come. I wrote down every memory, every loan, every hurtful word. I listed all the times I had said yes when my heart screamed no. Slowly, the fog of self-doubt began to lift, even if just a little. The depression didn't disappear overnight, but I started seeing a therapist through a low-cost program. She helped me understand that what I was experiencing was betrayal trauma, the deep wound that comes when the people who are supposed to protect you become the source of your pain. I still had many dark days. There were mornings I couldn't get out of bed. There were evenings I avoided calls from Michael while he was at work because I didn't want him to hear how broken I sounded. But I kept showing up for therapy, for small walks around the block, for tiny moments of normalcy like cooking a simple meal with Michael. This was the darkest period of my life. I felt abandoned, worthless, and completely shattered. But even in that darkness, the first fragile seeds of my transformation were being planted. I didn't know it yet, But I was about to discover truths far worse than I had imagined, and those truths would eventually fuel the fight that changed everything. The weeks following that first court hearing were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and sleepless nights, but nothing prepared me for what we would uncover in Act 6 of this nightmare. The judge had ordered a deeper investigation into the forged documents, and with the help of a forensic accountant named Rachel recommended by Legal Aid, I started digging into the financial records like never before. Rachel came to our house one rainy afternoon with boxes of documents and a serious expression. "Emily, this goes much deeper than one forged signature," she said quietly, as she spread everything across our dining table. Michael sat beside me, holding my hand. I thought I was ready. I wasn't. The first major discovery came within the first hour. Rachel pointed to a series of wire transfers from Dad's company account to an offshore account in Linda's maiden name. Over $320,000 had been moved in the last 4 years alone. These weren't business expenses, Rachel explained. These were personal withdrawals disguised as vendor payments to shell companies. My stomach dropped. That was money I had helped earn for them through my loans and bookkeeping help. But that was only the beginning. As we went deeper, Rachel pulled up emails she had subpoenaed. There were dozens of messages between Linda and a man named Victor, Dad's longtime business partner. The emails weren't just friendly. They were intimate, romantic, plans for a future together once the old man retired and the assets were secured. One email from Linda read, "Richard is so trusting. He signs anything I put in front of him. The daughter is the only obstacle. We just need to push her out completely." I felt physically sick. I had to step away to the bathroom and splash cold water on my face. Michael followed me, rubbing my back as I cried. "She was never part of the family," I whispered. "She was playing a long game." The revelations kept coming, each one more painful than the last. We discovered that Linda had started manipulating Dad almost immediately after they got married. She had convinced him to change the will multiple times, slowly removing me while telling him it was for tax purposes or protecting the family. Even worse, Mom's original life insurance payout, the money that was supposed to help with my education and future, had been redirected by Linda years ago into a private account. Dad had known about it. He had signed the papers. I sat there, staring at the documents, tears falling onto the paper. The man who used to comfort me after Mom died had helped steal the last piece of her legacy from me. But the biggest twist came 2 days later. Rachel called me early in the morning, her voice urgent. "Emily, you need to come to my office right now. There's something you need to see." When I arrived, she showed me bank records and property deeds I never knew existed. Linda and Victor had already purchased a villa in Spain under a different company name. They had planned to sell Dad's construction business, transfer the proceeds, and leave the country together, leaving Dad with almost nothing, and me completely cut out. The most devastating part, some of the money used for the down payment on that Spanish villa had come directly from the loans I had given Dad over the years. I drove home in silence that day. The betrayal felt so complete, so calculated, that it almost didn't feel real. When I told Michael, he held me for a long time without speaking. Then he said softly, "This isn't just greed. This is evil." I spent the next several days in a fog of new pain. I replayed every interaction with Linda, the warm hugs, the "I love you, sweetheart," the homemade meals. All of it was fake. A performance. She had looked me in the eyes for years while planning to destroy my future. I also discovered that Linda had been spreading quiet rumors about me to the extended family for over a year, painting me as selfish, money-hungry, and distant. That explained why so many relatives had turned against me so quickly. She had been building her exit strategy while smiling at our family barbecues. The final blow came when Rachel uncovered one last set of documents. Dad had signed a power of attorney, giving Linda complete control over his finances just months before the court case, while he was still telling me everything was fine. He had chosen her completely. That night, I sat on the porch alone until 3 a.m., wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. The little girl who once believed her father could do no wrong was gone. In her place was a woman who was angry, heartbroken, and finally seeing the truth clearly. But with that truth came something else: clarity and power. For the first time since the nightmare began, I didn't just feel pain. I felt purpose. These discoveries weren't just devastating. They were ammunition. Rachel told me the evidence was strong enough for both civil and potential criminal charges. Forgery, fraud, elder manipulation, the list was long. I looked at the folder of evidence on the table the next morning and whispered to myself, "They tried to destroy me. Now I'm going to make sure the truth destroys their lies." The darkest period had been brutal, but discovering the full truth lit a fire in me. I was no longer just surviving. I was preparing. The woman who once gave everything without question was transforming into someone strategic, strong, and unstoppable. And the best or worst was yet to come. After uncovering the full extent of Linda's deception in those heartbreaking meetings with Rachel, something inside me began to shift. The pain was still there, raw and heavy, but it no longer paralyzed me completely. For the first time in months, I felt a small but steady flame of determination growing in my chest. This was the beginning of my rebuilding. It didn't happen overnight. The first steps were tiny and painful. I started waking up at the same time every morning, even when I wanted to hide under the covers. I forced myself to take a short walk around the neighborhood before work. At first, those walks were silent and tearful. I would replay the courtroom scene or the emails between Linda and Victor, but gradually, the fresh air and movement started to clear some of the fog in my mind. Michael was my rock during this time. He never pushed me, but he gently encouraged me every day. One Saturday morning, he surprised me with a new journal, a beautiful leather-bound one with my initials on it. "Write whatever you feel," he said softly. "The good, the bad, and the things you're going to become." That journal became my safe space. Every night I wrote pages and pages, not just about the betrayal, but about who I wanted to be on the other side of it. I went back to therapy twice a week. My therapist, Dr. Patel, helped me understand that what I experienced wasn't just financial betrayal. It was a deep betrayal of trust by the one parent I had left. She taught me exercises to rebuild my self-worth. One of them was standing in front of the mirror every morning and saying, "I am enough. My worth is not defined by what I can give others." At first, the words felt like lies, but I kept saying them. Slowly, they started to feel real. I also started setting small boundaries. When a cousin called trying to guilt me into dropping the case, I calmly said, "I love you, but I won't discuss this with you. This is between me, Dad, and the court." Then I hung up. The old Emily would have spent hours explaining herself and feeling guilty. The new Emily protected her peace. Work became a place of healing, too. I returned part-time at first, My boss was surprisingly understanding once I shared a little of what was happening. I threw myself into projects with a new focus. Numbers had always calmed me, and now they became part of my recovery. I even started mentoring a young junior analyst who reminded me of myself years ago, eager, hard-working, and people-pleasing. Helping her set boundaries at work felt like healing a younger version of myself. One of the most powerful moments came during a quiet evening at home. I pulled out all the old photo albums, the ones from before Linda entered our lives. I looked at pictures of Mom holding me as a baby, Dad pushing me on the swing, the three of us on family trips. I cried for a long time, but instead of only feeling loss, I felt gratitude for the love that once existed. I also felt anger, healthy anger, at how that love had been twisted and used against me. I decided to create a new vision for my life. Michael and I started talking seriously about our future again. We made a list of dreams we had put on hold, starting a family, traveling together, buying a home with a garden where our children could play. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe those dreams were possible again. I also began reading books that changed how I saw myself, books about betrayal trauma, financial empowerment, and women who rebuilt after family crises. One quote stuck with me deeply. "The phoenix doesn't rise from the ashes because the fire was kind. She rises because she refuses to stay down." My confidence grew slowly but surely. I started speaking up more in meetings at work. I said no to extra projects that drained me. I even joined a support group for adult children of narcissistic parents. Listening to other people's stories made me realize I wasn't alone, and that I was actually one of the stronger ones for choosing to fight instead of staying silent. The strategic thinking started during this period too. I spent evenings organizing all the evidence Rachel had helped uncover. I created timelines, spreadsheets, and clear summaries of every transaction. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. I met with my lawyer regularly and asked smart questions. I studied similar court cases online. The scared daughter, who once represented herself out of desperation, was transforming into a calm, prepared woman who understood her rights. One particularly healing day, Michael and I drove to the lake where we used to vacation with Dad and Linda. We sat on the same bench I once shared with my father. I told Michael, "I'm not going to let their actions define the rest of my life. I want to build something beautiful for us, for our future children, and for the woman I'm becoming." He smiled with tears in his eyes and kissed my forehead. "That's my fighter." He whispered the same words my dad used to say. By the end of this rebuilding phase, I was no longer the broken woman who cried on the bathroom floor. I was still hurting, still processing, but I was stronger, clearer, more determined. I looked at the growing folder of evidence on my desk one night and felt a quiet power. The woman who once gave everything without question was gone. In her place stood someone who knew her worth, who protected her peace, and who was ready to fight intelligently for justice. Little did I know, that preparation would soon lead to the most important phase, yet gathering the final pieces and preparing for the justice that my family never expected. With my inner strength slowly returning after months of darkness, I entered the most focused and strategic phase of this entire journey, preparing for justice. This wasn't about revenge in the angry, emotional sense anymore. This was about being smart, thorough, and unstoppable. I refused to walk into that final courtroom unprepared again. The preparation began in earnest the week after my last major therapy breakthrough. Rachel, the forensic accountant, became a key ally. We met at her office 3 times a week. She taught me how to read financial documents like a detective. Together, we built a master timeline that stretched back 8 years, every loan I gave, every transfer Linda made, every forged signature, every suspicious email. I turned our spare bedroom into a war room. The walls were covered with printed evidence, color-coded sticky notes, and chronological charts. Michael would come home from work and find me surrounded by papers, but instead of worrying, he started helping. He'd bring me coffee and review documents with fresh eyes. "You're terrifying when you're focused," he teased one night with a proud smile. It felt good to laugh again. My lawyer, Mr. Harlan, a calm, experienced man in his late 50s, who took my case after seeing the strength of the evidence, was impressed with how organized I had become. In our strategy meetings, I no longer sat quietly. I asked sharp questions. I suggested approaches. I pointed out inconsistencies in Dad and Linda's previous statements. "Mr. Harlan," said one day, "Emily, you went from representing yourself out of desperation to becoming the most prepared client I've had this year. That validation meant everything. We left no stone unturned. We subpoenaed bank records from 3 different institutions. We got phone records showing hundreds of calls between Linda and Victor during business hours. We even tracked down the real estate agent in Spain who had helped them with the secret villa purchase." Every new piece of evidence felt like another brick in the wall I was building around the truth. The emotional side of preparation was harder. I had to revisit every painful memory with clarity instead of just pain. I recorded video statements for the court explaining each major loan, why I gave the money, what Dad and Linda had promised, and how they betrayed that trust. Hearing my own voice describing the betrayal out loud was difficult, but it also made me stronger. One particularly difficult afternoon, I sat across from Mr. Harlan as we prepared my testimony. He asked me to describe the moment Dad laughed at me in court. I broke down midway through. He waited patiently, then said gently, "That pain is your power now, Emily. When you tell the judge what happened, let them feel it the way you did." I nodded, wiped my tears, and practiced until my voice stayed steady. Meanwhile, Dad and Linda weren't sitting still. They tried to pressure me through family members. My uncle called one evening and said, "Your father is suffering. Emily, he's not well. Just settle this quietly for the family's sake." I responded calmly, but firmly. This stopped being about family the day they forged my signature and tried to steal my mother's legacy. After that, the calls decreased. Linda even tried one last manipulation. She sent me a long handwritten letter filled with apologies and claims that Victor had tricked her. I read it once, then handed it straight to Mr. Harlan. It contained new admissions we could use against her. The suspense built every single day. Court dates were delayed twice, which only gave us more time to strengthen the case. I barely slept some nights, not from anxiety, but from determination. I visualized walking into that courtroom with my head high, no longer the broken daughter they expected. Michael and I also prepared our future at the same time. We started looking at houses again, ones with space for the baby we now dared to dream about. I opened a new savings account that only my name was on. Small actions, but each one reminded me that I was building a life they could no longer touch. The most satisfying part of this preparation was watching my own transformation. The woman who once wired money without question was now cross-referencing bank statements like a professional auditor. The daughter, who feared disappointing her father, was now ready to expose the truth without hesitation. One quiet evening, as I was reviewing the final evidence folder, I whispered to myself, "They laughed at me when I had nothing. Now they'll face me when I have everything the truth." The preparation phase lasted nearly 3 months. By the end, our case was ironclad. Mr. Harlan looked at me during our final strategy meeting and said, "We're ready, Emily. This is going to be a powerful hearing." I looked at the thick binder on the table, months of pain turned into proof, and felt a deep, quiet confidence I had never known before. The first cracks in their defense were about to show. The betrayers who thought they could destroy me were about to face the woman they created. And I was ready. The months of careful preparation finally started bearing fruit. What began as small cracks in their carefully constructed lies soon turned into visible collapses. This was the phase where I watched the people who had tried to destroy me begin to lose control, and for the first time, I felt the momentum shifting strongly in my favor. It started with Victor. Rachel called me one Tuesday morning, her voice excited. "Emily, Victor's lawyer reached out. He wants to talk. He's willing to testify against Linda in exchange for leniency." I sat down slowly, my heart racing. The man who had helped plan their escape to Spain was now turning on his partner. Karma was beginning to move. We met Victor in a neutral conference room downtown. He looked nothing like the confident businessman I remembered from Dad's company parties. His eyes were tired. His hands fidgeted constantly. He admitted everything: the secret affair with Linda, the shell companies, the forged documents, and the plan to leave the country. "She told me Richard was weak and you were too busy to notice," he said, avoiding my eyes. I didn't think it would go this far. I listened without interrupting, but inside I felt both vindication and sadness. Every word he spoke added another layer of proof to our case. Mr. Harlan was thrilled. These new statements made Linda's position almost impossible to defend. The first real consequence hit Dad and Linda the following week. The judge issued a temporary asset freeze on all joint accounts in the company. They could no longer sell the business or move money freely. I heard through a mutual family friend that Linda had screamed at Dad when the notice arrived at their house. For the first time, Dad started questioning her. He called me late one night. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. His voice was shaky and weak. "Emily, I think I made a terrible mistake. Linda says this is all Victor's fault, but I'm not sure anymore." I stayed quiet, letting him speak. He rambled for several minutes, mixing apologies with excuses. She handled all the paperwork. I trusted her. I finally replied, my voice steady, "Dad. She forged my signature. She stole from you. She planned to leave you with nothing." He went silent. I could hear him breathing heavily. Before he could respond, I said, "The truth is coming out in court. All of it." Then I hung up. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. For years I had softened every blow for him. Those days were over. Linda's carefully maintained image began crumbling fast. She tried calling me several times from different numbers. In one voicemail she sounded desperate. "Emily, please, we can fix this as a family. Don't destroy your father over money." I saved every message for evidence. Her panic was clear. The woman who once controlled every narrative was now losing control. The most powerful moment came during a pre-hearing deposition. Linda had to testify under oath. Mr. Harlan questioned her about the forged signature. At first she denied everything smoothly, playing the innocent stepmother. But when he presented the emails between her and Victor, her composure broke. She started crying, then got angry, accusing everyone of conspiring against her. The court reporter's fingers flew across the keyboard as Linda's mask slipped completely. Dad was also deposed. I wasn't in the room, but Mr. Harlan told me later that Dad looked broken. When shown the documents with his own signatures next to Linda's forgeries, he admitted he hadn't fully understood what he was signing. He kept repeating, "I thought she was protecting us." For the first time in years, my father looked small and regretful. The extended family that had sided with them started changing their tone. A few cousins messaged me privately, apologizing for believing the lies Linda had spread. One aunt even admitted, "We didn't know the full story, Emily. We're so sorry." Their support wasn't loud, but it gave me strength. With every new piece of evidence submitted, I felt myself growing taller. I walked into meetings with Mr. Harlan with clear eyes and a calm voice. The nervous, shaking woman from the first hearing was gone. In her place was someone who knew the truth and wasn't afraid to speak it. Michael noticed the change too. One evening as we cooked dinner together, he smiled and said, "You're glowing with strength, Em. I'm so proud of you." Those words healed something deep inside me. I wasn't just fighting for money or justice anymore. I was fighting for the version of myself they tried to erase. The first fall of the betrayers created a chain reaction. Assets were frozen. Credibility was shattered. Dad was slowly waking up to how thoroughly he had been manipulated. Linda was desperate, making mistakes and losing the control she once held so tightly. But this was only the beginning. The final confrontation was approaching fast. Everything we had built, all the evidence, all the pain turned into power, was leading to one decisive day in court. I could feel it in my bones. The people who laughed at me when I had no lawyer were about to face the woman who had become unstoppable. And this time, I wasn't alone. The day of the final hearing arrived like a storm that had been building for months. I woke up before sunrise, my heart pounding, but my mind strangely calm. I stood in front of the mirror, in the soft morning light, adjusting the simple navy blue suit I had chosen. No flashy clothes, no attempt to look like someone I wasn't, just me, the daughter they had underestimated, now ready to speak her truth. Michael kissed my forehead before we left the house. "You've got this, Em. The truth is on your side." I nodded, squeezing his hand tightly. We drove to the courthouse in silence, the morning sun breaking through the clouds as if the universe itself was finally aligning. The courtroom was fuller than I expected. Several relatives sat on both sides. Some avoided my eyes. Others gave me small, supportive nods. Dad and Linda were already seated. Dad looked older than I had ever seen him, frail, tired, and nervous. Linda sat rigidly beside him, her usual polished appearance cracked. Her makeup was heavy, but couldn't hide the stress lines on her face. When the judge entered, everyone stood. My hands were steady as I took my place at the table with Mr. Harlan. This time I wasn't representing myself out of desperation. I had a skilled lawyer and a mountain of undeniable evidence. The proceedings began with Mr. Harlan presenting our final summary. He walked the court through the entire timeline, starting from the early loans I had given out of love, to the forged signatures, the secret emails, the offshore accounts, and the planned escape to Spain. Each piece of evidence was displayed on the large screen. The courtroom was completely silent except for the occasional gasp from the gallery. Then, it was time for testimony. Linda went first. She tried to play the victim again, claiming she was only trying to protect Dad, that Victor had manipulated her, that I was exaggerating everything because of jealousy. But Mr. Harlan was prepared. He presented email after email, voice recordings, bank records. With every new document, Linda's voice grew more defensive, then shaky, then desperate. At one point, she looked straight at me and said, "Emily, How can you do this to your own father? I met her eyes without flinching. How could you do this to me? For years. The judge allowed me to speak. I stood up slowly, my voice clear and steady. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply told the truth. I was 12 when I lost my mother. My father was my entire world. I spent years trying to make him proud. I gave him nearly $200,000 because I believed in family. Because I believed in him. And in return, my signature was forged. My mother's legacy was stolen, and I was laughed at in this very courtroom when I couldn't afford a lawyer. I turned slightly toward Dad. Our eyes met for the first time in months. Dad, you once called me your little fighter. Today I'm fighting for the girl you used to love, the one you were supposed to protect. Dad's shoulders began to shake. Tears rolled down his face. For the first time, he looked truly broken, not by the money, but by the weight of his choices. Linda tried one final outburst, accusing me of destroying the family. The judge silenced her firmly. Then, Victor was called. His testimony was devastating. He detailed the entire plan, how Linda had approached him, how they had celebrated when I was removed from the trust, how they had mocked my loyalty behind my back. The courtroom felt electric. Every revelation landed like a hammer. In my closing statement, I spoke from the heart. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here for justice, not just for the money, but for the little girl who lost her mother and trusted her father completely. For every daughter who is told that family means silent sacrifice, for every woman who is laughed at when she dares to stand up for herself. The judge listened intently. When I finished, there was complete silence. Dad asked if he could speak. The judge allowed it. He stood slowly, his voice trembling. I failed you, Emily. I let myself be blinded. I laughed at you because I was ashamed of what I had become. I'm so sorry, my little fighter. His words broke something in me, but not in a destructive way. It was release. Linda said nothing. She sat there staring at the table, defeated. The judge announced he would deliver the ruling after a short recess. Those 30 minutes felt like hours. Michael held my hand tightly in the hallway. I closed my eyes and breathed. When we returned, the judge delivered a powerful ruling. He found in my favor on every major count. Full restoration of my inheritance share. Compensation for all loans plus damages. Linda was ordered to repay over $450,000 and faced referral for criminal forgery charges. The company sale was blocked. Assets were to be properly divided. As the gavel came down, it felt like the final chapter of a long nightmare had closed. Outside the courtroom, Dad approached me slowly. Linda had already left with her lawyer, avoiding everyone. Tears streamed down his face as he stood before me. Emily, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I was wrong. Completely wrong. I looked at the man who had once been my hero. My voice was soft, but strong. I loved you more than anything, Dad, but love without respect destroyed us. I hope you find peace. I'm going to find mine. I turned and walked away with Michael's arm around me. No dramatic screaming, no final cruel words, just truth, just closure, just the end of their control over my life. The final confrontation was over, and I had won, not just in court, but within myself. The gavel's final sound still echoed in my ears as we stepped out of the courtroom into the bright afternoon sunlight. For a moment, everything felt surreal. Months of pain, preparation, tears, and sleepless nights had culminated in this single ruling. Justice had been served not perfectly, but powerfully. Mr. Harlan shook my hand firmly. You did exceptionally well in there, Emily. This is one of the strongest family fraud cases I've handled." I thanked him, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael pulled me into a tight embrace right there on the courthouse steps. I could feel his pride, his relief, and his love wrapping around me. For the first time in over a year, I allowed myself to breathe deeply without that heavy weight on my chest. The consequences began unfolding immediately. Linda was hit the hardest. The judge's order required her to repay $450,000 in damages and misappropriated funds within 18 months. Her assets, including the secret Spanish villa deposit, were seized. Criminal charges for forgery and fraud were officially referred to the district attorney. I later learned she had to sell her jewelry and luxury items to make the first payment. The woman who had once sat at our family table calling me sweetheart was now facing the reality of her choices. Victor's testimony had sealed her fate. Their grand escape plan had collapsed completely. Dad's fall was quieter but equally devastating. The court stripped him of full control over the construction company. A neutral trustee was appointed to manage the sale and ensure proper distribution. He lost the luxury retirement dreams he and Linda had built on lies. I heard through family that he moved into a modest apartment after the house was put up for sale to cover debts. The man who once laughed at me in court now spent his days reflecting on the wreckage. A few days after the ruling, I received the first official court documents confirming my compensation. When the initial transfer hit my account, a significant portion of everything I had lost, I sat at the kitchen table and cried. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming release. Michael sat beside me, tears in his own eyes. "You fought for this, Em. You earned every penny." But the real justice wasn't just financial. Several relatives who had distanced themselves reached out with genuine apologies. Some admitted Linda had manipulated them with lies and half-truths. One cousin even said, "We should have listened to you. We're sorry we doubted you." I accepted their apologies gracefully, but I no longer rushed to rebuild those relationships. I was protecting my peace now. The most emotional moment came 2 weeks later. Dad called me. This time I answered. His voice was hoarse and humble. "Emily, can we meet? Just us. No lawyers. No Linda." I agreed, but only at a neutral cafe near my house. Michael waited in the car outside, giving me space, but staying close. Dad arrived looking smaller than I remembered. His clothes hung loosely, and his eyes carried deep regret. We sat across from each other with coffee neither of us touched. "I have no right to ask for forgiveness," he began, his hands trembling. "I failed you in every way a father shouldn't. When your mother died, I promised I would protect you. Instead, I let Linda poison everything. I laughed at you in that courtroom because I couldn't face my own shame. I'm so sorry, my little fighter." Hearing those words, the same nickname from my childhood broke the last wall around my heart. I let the tears fall freely. "I loved you more than anything, Dad. I gave and gave because I thought that's what family meant. But you chose her. You chose the lies. I had to choose myself." We sat in silence for a long time. He didn't make excuses. He didn't defend Linda. For once, he just listened as I told him how deep the betrayal had cut the sleepless nights, the self-doubt, the fear that I was the problem. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "I'm losing everything," he said quietly, "but the worst part is losing you." I looked at him with compassion, but not the old blind loyalty. "I'm not disappearing from your life completely, but things will be different. Limited contact. No more money. No more sacrifices. I need to heal. He accepted it. There were no dramatic pleas, just a tired, broken man acknowledging the consequences of his choices. As I walked back to the car, I felt lighter. Justice wasn't about destroying him. It was about balance, about accountability, about closing the chapter on the version of myself that existed only to serve others. Linda tried one last desperate attempt. She sent a long email begging me to ask the court for leniency on the criminal charges. I forwarded it to Mr. Harlan without replying. That chapter was closed. Over the following months, the financial restitution continued. I used part of it to pay off our mortgage and create a college fund for the baby we were now expecting. The rest went into safe investments accounts, only in my name. I started my own small financial consulting business, helping other women protect themselves from family financial abuse. It felt like the perfect full circle. Dad and I maintained careful, occasional contact. Coffee meetings once every few months. No deep trust, but a fragile peace. Linda was out of his life completely and facing ongoing legal battles. Justice had been served. Not the dramatic movie kind with cheering crowds, but the real kind, quiet, lasting, and deeply healing. The betrayers faced real consequences. The daughter they tried to break had risen stronger. I stood in our nursery one evening, hand on my growing belly, and whispered to my unborn child, "I will always protect you." Not by sacrificing myself, but by showing you how to stand up for what's right. The fight was over. The healing had truly begun. The months after the final hearing unfolded like the first warm days after a long, brutal winter. The storm had passed. The damage was real, but the ground was finally clear for something new and beautiful to grow. This was the season of healing and new beginnings, the part of the story I had fought so hard to reach. Life didn't magically become perfect overnight, but it became mine again. Michael and I welcomed our daughter, Sophia, into the world on a quiet spring morning. Holding her for the first time, I felt a love so complete it healed parts of me I didn't know were still broken. As I looked into her tiny face, I made a silent promise. I would show her what healthy love looks like. I would teach her that family means respect, not endless sacrifice, that her worth is never measured by how much she can give others. We moved into a beautiful new home with a sunny backyard, a home bought with money that was finally ours, without guilt or strings attached. I planted a small garden there. Every time I watered the flowers, it felt symbolic. I was nurturing new life after years of pouring everything into people who only took. I officially launched my financial consulting business, Safe Foundations, focused on helping women, especially daughters and wives, protect their financial futures from family manipulation. The first few clients came from support groups I had joined during my darkest days. Listening to their stories and guiding them through setting boundaries and documenting assets felt incredibly fulfilling. Every time a client told me, "Emily, you gave me the courage to say no," it reinforced that my pain had a greater purpose. Dad and I maintained a careful, limited relationship. We met for coffee every 2 or 3 months. The conversations were never deep or nostalgic in the old way. We talked about the weather, Sophia's milestones, and neutral topics. He had aged significantly. The regret in his eyes never fully left. He apologized many times, and while I accepted his words, I never gave him back the unlimited access to my heart or my life. That boundary was firm and non-negotiable. It brought me peace. Linda disappeared from our lives almost completely. The criminal case moved forward slowly. Last I heard, she had moved to another state and was still fighting the financial judgments. I no longer felt anger when her name came up, only a quiet detachment. She no longer had power over my emotions. One of the most beautiful parts of this healing journey was rediscovering myself. I started running again early mornings when the world was still quiet. I joined a book club with women who became real friends. I took painting classes with Michael on weekends, laughing at our terrible artwork. Small joys that I had forgotten existed when I was constantly trying to earn love. Therapy continued, but it changed from survival to growth. Dr. Patel and I worked on releasing the last remnants of self-doubt. I learned to celebrate my strength instead of questioning if I was too much for standing up for myself. I finally understood that choosing myself wasn't selfish. It was the most loving thing I could do for my family, my daughter, and my future. Looking back now, the lessons are crystal clear. I learned that blood does not give anyone the right to drain you. Love without respect is not love, it's control. Silence in the face of betrayal only protects the betrayer. And the strongest revenge isn't destruction, it's living a full, peaceful, successful life despite their attempts to break you. I also learned that healing is not linear. There are still hard days when old memories surface, and the pain feels fresh. But those days are fewer now, and I know how to sit with them without letting them define me. Sophia is 2 years old now. She has my eyes and Michael's smile. When she reaches for me with her little hands, I feel overwhelming gratitude. The girl who once lost her mother and was betrayed by her father is now building a loving, stable home for her own child. I often sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset, reflecting on how far I've come. From the broken woman crying on the bathroom floor to this a wife, a mother, a business owner, and, most importantly, a woman who knows her worth. The little fighter my father once spoke of didn't disappear. She simply grew up, found her voice, and refused to be silenced again. This is my new beginning, a life built on truth, boundaries, and self-respect. A life where I no longer pour from an empty cup. A life where I am finally free. If you've stayed with me through this long journey, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Sharing my story wasn't easy, but if even one person listening feels less alone, then every tear, every court hearing, and every hard day was worth it. To anyone watching who is going through family betrayal right now, especially financial or emotional abuse from parents or close relatives, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Your loyalty should never be more important than your peace. And when they laugh at you in your weakest moment, remember, that moment can become the fuel for your greatest strength. I'm Emily Thompson. I lost my mother young. I was betrayed by the father I adored. I was mocked in court for not having a lawyer, but I rose. I fought. I rebuilt. And today, I am living proof that justice is possible and healing is real. The greatest revenge isn't destroying them. It's becoming the woman they could never break. Thank you for listening. Protect your heart. Trust your instincts. And never be afraid to choose yourself. You deserve a life that feels like freedom.